That's my best friend. That's my best friend.
What's going on, guys? This is Garrett from RUNAMUCK Films, and today, when people talk about really important, scary movies, they're always talking about movies that came out decades ago. So they're usually talking about, The Exorcist, Psycho, Halloween, they're talking about all these movies that years and years and years ago laid a foundation, and the argument seems to be that nobody's really been building on that foundation, or that there's not been a level of originality that has even come close to matching what happened years and years and years ago. In the 2010s, however, I feel like there's definitely been a high resurgence. The quality of horror movies has definitely gone up again since 2010, in my opinion. What I wanted to do here is I basically wanted to highlight these movies that I believe years and years and years from now are going to be the movies that people are going to be talking about because of how influential and important they were to the genre itself. So the criteria for this list is that the movies all have to be from 2010 to 2019, so and roughly a 10-year period, because as soon as 2020 comes around, it's going to end this era. Sequels are not okay. If it's a spin-off, it is not allowed, because in order for a sequel or a spin-off to happen, there had to be an original movie. Remakes are also okay. I definitely tried to not make this a list of my favorite movies from the 2010s, but this is mainly just what I think is going to be looked back on as classics, or movies that laid their own foundations for other movies to build upon later down the line. So, real quick, I want to give some honorable mentions. The Witch, 2015, is an honorable mention, simply due to the fact that I have not seen it. It Follows, from 2014. It has a very unique and interesting premise. It is a very interesting movie. Sexually transmitted killer, in a sense. Something that I think is unique enough to have almost been on the list, but there's so much there's so many good horror movies in the 2010s, and it just barely missed out on it. Number 10, this is The Babadook from 2014. Now, this is one of those movies that when it came out, it was kind of a big deal. It was indie, low budget. One of the things that is very, very, I feel like, influential, what makes a movie influential, is that it created a resurgence in movies that specialize in creating horrifying and disturbing, intense scenes relating to the mother. Because the mother figure has always been, the figure of nurturing, caring, really love. It's always this idea of the mom going after a child, or it's something that's just disturbing, and it's something that's alarming. And as you go through The Babadook, you kind of start to learn that's what the movie's going for. That's the kind of angle the movie's going for. It's this film where this mother and her son experience a tragedy together, and ultimately kind of have to go through life dealing with it. Their biggest battle seems to be, their battle with each other, with being a son, with being a mom. It's difficult, it's definitely, it really got started with Psycho, where the mother figure is recognized, or even more so, Mommy Dearest, very highlighted and fucking terrifying. It helped bring it back into our modern society very, very well, I feel like. And the reason it strikes out at number 10 is because I feel like it helped to influence so many other evil mom related movies, including Goodnight Mommy, which came out later that same year. Of course, there is a entry later in this list that is heavily influenced by The Babadook, which we will get to later. But for now, we will get on to number 9. Horror remakes are very, very to come. Whenever one really does come by, and not only does it pay homage to the original, not only does it, work in some good modern thrills, not only does it change the story enough to make it, recognizable to the original, but so different enough to be called its own, is very, very rare to come by. And I think the Evil Dead remake does that very, very well. It does it as well as it possibly can without reaching that cult campy status of the original movies, without going that direction, but without far in the comes, teen horror movie, another Friday the 13th remake, another Halloween remake, Suffer movie, and helped bring new fans closer and helped bring old fans of the original Evil Dead closer to these. I mean, that's never going to get back to, movies have. So it only makes sense to, try and close that gap and bring us closer to, modern times. And with modern audiences, it's exposure to those older movies, exposure, in my opinion. And on top of that, Evil Dead 2013 was able to help kickstart and begin development for the hilarious and just amazing Ash vs. Evil Dead show on Stars. What makes it so important is that it was able to close the gap and influence even more Evil Dead properties down the line. Because for a really long time, there was no Evil Dead. There were maybe some comic books, maybe a few video games here and there, but it was very, very lacking for Evil Dead fans. And that movie, shooting right into the mainstream, helped propel us Evil Dead fans even further into infamy. Anyway, moving on. Number 8, 2016's Hush. And for those of you that remember Hush, you know why it's on this list instead of A Quiet Place. Because remember, this is about movies that are very important and very influential. So, Hush, being a movie about a deaf, mute woman, and having a lot of the movie be silent and quiet, and really from her perspective of being deaf and mute, I think that, I think that is where the foundation for the niche genre of movies about the senses really came into play, because that same year Don't Breathe came out, and that was a big deal for a little while because of how fucking disgusting it is. Hush was the movie that really, really made that prominent, made that whole idea for a movie very, very prominent and very, very successful. Um, because later, when A Quiet Place did it, everybody loved it, and then later, even still, when Bird Box came out, everybody loved that. So I just feel like Hush just kind of acts more as that stepping stone, acts more as that that first building block to help really get the ball rolling for all these other sense-related movies, like The Quiet Place. So yeah. So number 7, I I watched this movie not too long ago. Like, this was my first time ever seeing this movie. The Visit from 2015. This is, oh god, I wish I could put this higher. I wish I could put almost all these movies. Like I said, if this was like my favorite horror movies from the 2010s, this is top 5. But unfortunately, it ranks in at number 7. And even then, that's probably being super, super biased towards it. But I adore this movie. This is a great movie. This is a great one right here. Okay, so like basically, why this is important is because there are 2 reasons why this is important. And the first reason is related to the found footage genre as a whole. Visit does for found footage movies what it does for M. Night Shyamalan's career, in the sense that it reinvigorates the found footage genre, because the movie the entire time is playing with your perspective, your point of view, how we perceive things as they're happening. Look at the grandfather when he's holding the gun. Is he holding it in his mouth? Is he really just cleaning it? It's one of those things that no matter which way you look at it, it can look very, very convincing. And that is so amazing to me, because that is what I feel like found footage films are supposed to do. They're supposed to play with your point of view. And for M. Night Shyamalan, it basically created this situation where for years and years and years, he was striking out left and right. The guy could not catch a break. It was eventually what led to him creating his success in Split and Glass. And he's got a new movie coming out on Apple TV. So that's a good thing, because in some ways M. Night Shyamalan really is a genius. You know, Unbreakable is one of my favorite movies of all time. So that being said, we'll go ahead and we'll just move on. Number 6. So I, in the middle of this recording session, I straight up had to swap these two around because it just didn't feel right for number 6 the way where it was prior to be where number 5 was. So I had to switch it around. So now, it 2017 is number 6. So this one kind of is, in many ways, this is kind of a repeat of number 9, Evil Dead. Because with the Evil Dead remake, you didn't really need a remake, but it was a remake that we didn't need that was good. With it 2017, it's a remake that we needed and it was good. So that was a good combo. You know, the child acting was really, really good. I mean, if I'm being honest, there would be no It 2017 without Stranger Things, if I'm being completely honest. But It 2017 kind of showed that in this day and age, that something Stephen King related can be adapted into something that's genuinely scary and terrifying. You know, without this movie, a lot of other, decent Stephen King properties would probably not have come out the way they did. You know, with Pet Cemetery and Castle Rock being one of like the best shows on Hulu, honestly. I think it really had a place, because with Stephen King, he has such a foothold in the horror community. It was about time that we got around to actually making some serious and legitimately good horror movies. So yeah. Okay, so number 5 is Insidious. So a movie is definitely doing something right when it turns someone like me who doesn't like ghost movies into someone who adores this movie about ghosts. It's God, it's so good. It's so good. In my opinion, Insidious Chapter 2 is really where it's at. But like I said, no sequels or anything. And of course, there'd be no Insidious Chapter 2 without Chapter 1. And honestly, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 tie so well together that it's like its own movie. It's like an amalgamation of two movies into, you know, two separate yet flowing narratives. It really, really just works. And James Wan, who wrote and directed it, uh, moved from this in 2010 to what would eventually become his most popular and arguably the most popular ghost-related franchise in this day and age, in the current 2010s. We would not have ghost movies now the way they are without it. I obviously the later sequels are not that great, which is also kind of the reason that the successor to this franchise, you'll know the one I'm talking about, is the main source of where James Wan's success was focused. With that being said, we'll go ahead and jump right into that other franchise coming up next. So number 4 is obviously The Conjuring. From 2013. The Conjuring is without a doubt probably the most influential ghost related movie in this day and age. I mean, it started a cinematic universe around it. Like, that doesn't happen in horror movies that much, unless it's a string of sequels. There's not really a whole lot of horror movies out there that I can think of that spin off and create separate franchises that link together with the original. That's even close to what the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been doing. Audiences find it terrifying. Most audiences find it terrifying, and it it's got great acting and this, that, and the other, and it takes itself very seriously for what it is. I feel like that's why it garners so much attention, is because it's handled very, very professionally. Everyone treats it very seriously, and James Wan really comes over and brings whatever was started in Insidious over to the Conjuring film. In many ways, you could argue that Insidious is more important than The Conjuring, but considering that Insidious came out before The Conjuring and kind of laid a groundwork and acted as a practice stage for James Wan to step up from and into The Conjuring. But at the end of the day, not even a whole lot of people are looking back on Insidious and really pointing that out and saying it. Consider the two of them in very interchangeable positions. It could be on some days it could be one or the other. And I feel like most people are going to argue that Insidious belongs at 5, Conjuring's at number 4. Like I said, it could be interchangeable on any given day. So, moving on. Top 3. This is the nitty gritty. You remember how, like, earlier in the video I was talking about the Babadook, and I said that the Babadook inspires a movie later on this list? Well, that would be Hereditary. And the reason I separate the Babadook and Hereditary so far apart is because Hereditary comes along and really just amps up. It's definitely it's definitely one of those instances where, like what I was talking about earlier, the foundation is definitely set and then just expanded upon. On top, it is built on top of that, and it becomes stacked. It is a crazy stacked movie, if that's even like the right way to say it. Hereditary is crazy. Okay, it is way more terrifying than the Babadook, and the tragedy that the family goes through is it's just so much more intense and horrifying. But in some ways, very similar. It's just done so much better in Hereditary. Hereditary takes everything that the Babadook had set up and really built on top of it. It really went brick by brick on top of the Babadook, and it became its own thing, really rising above a lot of the other movies in its category. Some powerhouse acting and just, God, it in many ways it is the current definition of a horrifying movie about a mom, about mothers, or about motherhood in general, whichever way you want to really slice it. That's kind of a lot. That's kind of one of the major themes and motifs that this movie's really got going on here. And I think years and years and years from now, this is going to be the movie that people look back on and say that was the pinnacle of the scary mom movies. Number 2, great movie. It is Get Out, 2017 by Jordan Peele, and this was a huge success. This just, it both launched and solidified Jordan Peele's career as a director. I mean, that guy went from, just the guy that tells jokes to now one of the smartest and brilliant directors of our time. It is crazy. I mean, not only, just Get Out mark a fantastic debut, but it also laid the groundwork for even more great films to come along, like Us, which I have a review of on the channel when it came out. And, his Twilight Zone series. I mean, it's it's absolutely bonkers, because that just shows how well Get Out was, that he was able to do that for Jordan Peele's career. And Get Out, even on its own, is one of these movies where it's original and the dialogue is so good. I really wanted to mention the dialogue, because the dialogue, for a really long time, I don't think I ever noticed dialogue or writing that synced up so well like Jordan Peele's, because so many little tiny things will be talked about or nuanced, and so much can be taken from this movie. It is so packed with symbolism and metaphors. It challenges us in ways that most oftentimes in these days we're very, very touchy about confronting. And it's just one of these things where the movie just hits the nail right on the head, and does what horror movies are supposed to do, where they make you uncomfortable, but in many weird instances that work to the movie's advantage, will make you laugh. Sometimes we're laughing because we might see something that's genuinely funny, or we'll laugh because we're so uncomfortable. It defines modern sensibility, and you really can't ask for anything better than that, but there's still a number one. And number one is Cabin in the Woods from 2011. What can you really say about the movie that, hasn't been said before? Cabin in the Woods is dissecting and looking into what makes horror movies tick, not to discredit them and cause the very genre itself to go extinct, but exists to celebrate the genre. It exists to explore what it is about these movies that we as audience members enjoy so much. From the various references, the Evil Dead references, the Halloween references, the Hellraiser references. I mean, there's too many references to count, and it's trying its best to get in. It's trying its best to be an all-encompassing, be-all, end-all dissection of horror films, and it does that and then some. Like it gets on that horse and rides. Honestly, without this movie, we wouldn't have movies like Tucker and Dale versus Evil, or even the Evil Dead remake we mentioned earlier, because this movie was heavily inspired by events and plot points from the Evil Dead. The other half of its strengths come from its ability to poke fun, at itself, at all these other movies and cliches. And the movie wants us to be able to look at it, poke fun at it, and really, challenge what it is that we like about these movies, and then walk away still loving them. That's why I think it deserves to be number one. Yeah, it's really all I have left to say about it. Like, these are what I consider to be the top 10 most important movies, horror movies of the 2010s. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope I did a good job. I hope I was as fair as I could be. Whether you agree or disagree, I'm very interested in hearing what some of you other guys or some of you other people might think deserve to be on the list, or what you think needs to be off the list, what you think needs to be in its place, what order you think the list should be, reorganized in, because I've had to reorganize this list at least like 5 or 6 times. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you have a happy Halloween. I hope you have, a great fall and a great, rest of 2019. I'll see you guys later. Peace.